If I could, copy of the Open Meetings Act is located on the north wall of the Legislative Chamber, and also there's an automatic external defibrillator is available on the back wall. If I could, I'd ask the Honor Guard to come down at this time.
Ready? Freeze it.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order. Left. Forward.
Okay, if I could, I'd call the, we'll move around a little bit, the Board of Commissioners, roll call, please.
Commissioner Morgeson. Here. Commissioner Boyle. Here. Commissioner Kavanaugh. Here. Commissioner Duda. Here. Mr. Kraft. Here. Commissioner Rogers is absent. Mr. Chair.
Okay, I appreciate that. And at this time, I might ask Mark Foxall to come down for National Corrections Officers and Employees Week and read a resolution.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity. I'd like to read a resolution to recognize National Correction Officers Employees Week. Resolved, whereas in 1984, President Ronald Reagan signed Proclamation 5187 creating National Correctional Officers Week. Whereas Douglas County recognizes that the duties of corrections personnel has become increasingly complex and demanding. Whereas Douglas County recognizes that corrections personnel are called upon to perform a variety of duties to include, but not limited to, custody, supervision, crisis intervention, transportation, and facilitation of inmate programs. Whereas Douglas County recognizes that the professionalism, dedication, and courage exhibited by corrections personnel throughout the performance of these demanding and often conflicting roles deserve our utmost respect. Now, therefore, be it resolved that you, the Douglas County Board of Commissioners, do hereby acknowledge the week of May 6th through the 12th, 2018 as Correctional Officers and Employees Week in honor of those dedicated professionals who supervise and work with the county's inmate population. Dated this 8th day of May, 2018.
Motion by Mary Ann Borgeson and seconded by Mark Kraft of the resolution. Can we please vote?
Just to note once again, Commissioner Boyle's machine's not working, so he is voting yes, as are the rest of the commissioners present. Motion passes.
Do you know anybody on the building commission?
Yes, that's the problem.
Okay.
Commissioners, I would also call to your attention the corrections, the wreath, memorial wreath that is before you, Mr. Chair, and that wreath is in memory of correctional staff, retired and in the line of duty who have passed away. And they were honored yesterday at a memorial service at the Department of Corrections.
Thank you very much, Mark, for your comments, and we have a great appreciation of your correctional officers and the employees. Commissioner Boyle.
Thank you, Commissioner Morgan. I wanted to mention that I was honored to be asked to speak on behalf of the county board at the memorial service yesterday. And they have really done it up right. You should see the full complement of the honor guard. There's at least a dozen or so, and they really performed without a flaw. And the remarks by Dr. Foxall were totally, completely appropriate, very sensitive, really on point. And then one of the bonuses was that John Hubbard came. He's now director of Sarpy County Corrections. And John knew everyone. We were honoring 6 members of the corrections family that had died in the last year. And it got quite emotional. He was really terrific, and it added a real personal touch. He went through and told some good stories, and it was really remarkable. I hope he comes back next year. It really finished it up. And again, I want to thank the Honor Guard. They really, it was a first-class operation. It's really a great job again. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yes, Marianne Borges,
Thank you,
please.
Mr. Chair. If the honor guard is still here, do you think that we could have them come down and get our picture with them? And you, Mark?
Yes, ma'am.
Great idea.
Are they, oh, they are still here.
They are
Oh,
still
good.
here.
Okay, great.
Should we step around?
Yeah.
Well, I thought about words.
So make sure you reach out to me, because I don't have the machine here that'll tell me who wants to talk, and I'll decide if you'll talk or not. We're gonna have a lot more control than we've had in the past. All right, as I said, we're gonna jump around a little bit. I'd like to ask if Dean Miller's here, or hi, Dean. Deb is here.
Deborah Ward with Visit Omaha, 1620 Dodge. I don't have the proclamation in front of me.
Well, you
But-
know what? I'm going to give you one.
You have me read it? Or
Yes.
you want to read it? Why don't you read it and I'll thank you for that. Does that work? See, there's a lot more control here. It's coming from the podium.
I'm going to let you,
Thank you.
thanks for being here, Deb.
Thank you for having me. Every year, 12.3 million visitors visit Omaha to experience our world-renowned zoo, our beautiful museums, and our spectacular dining and craft brew scene. They travel to Omaha to visit friends and family, to attend sporting events, a convention, a concert, or just to get away for a long weekend. These travelers are making a significant impact on our local economy, spending more than $1.2 billion every year right here. These travelers generate significant tax revenues for federal, state, local governments, provide essential funding to support local services and programs for our residents, and directly support 17,280 jobs for our friends and family who work in our communities, hotels, attractions, retail restaurants, and other small businesses. And tourism success locally can be attributed to productive partnerships with industry, business, government leaders who understand its value and support its growth. In fact, on May 9th, 2018, tomorrow, Visit Omaha in partnership with Sarpy County Tourism and the Council Bluffs Convention and Visitors Bureau will celebrate frontline tourism employees at the second annual OMA Tourism Awards, and I think some of you are presenting there. National Tourism Week is celebrated May 6th through the 12th to bring attention to the industry's significant economic, educational, cultural, and social benefits. And now, therefore, be it resolved that this Board of County Commissioners you hereby declare May 6th through the 12th, 2018 as National Tourism Week. And thank you very much for proclaiming that. I was going to just take a moment to thank you, and I just read a lot of impressive numbers, and while we here at Visit Omaha are very proud of those numbers, sometimes they're too big to wrap your arms around when you think of $12.3 million, except for PJ and a couple of you, maybe don't know what that means. But I've got some more down-to-earth ways to explain it and show you what tourism looks like in our community. There's Catalina Roman. She is the assistant head housekeeper at the Fairfield Inn and Suites in downtown. She's been there since the beginning. She's a single mother with 3 children, and when the hotel is busy, she gets more hours, she gets more tips, and she has more money to support her family. There's Angela Hampton. She's a motor coach operator with Arrow Stage Lines. She's wanted to drive a bus her entire life and travel the interstates, or travel the country one interstate at a time. Because of all the groups that are in town who use motor coach, she is able to live out a dream and get paid for it, which she considers a bonus. There's Julius Nero III. He's a bartender at 1912 in Benson. His father passed away 2 years ago, and since then he's been supporting his mother. Because of 1912's success, that company has been able to take over Burke's Bar and another bar in Benson. And Julius works at all 3. He's even been able to start his own bartending business on the side for weddings and private events. Guess what happens when we have more tourists in town? He gets more hours, more money, and more money to support his family. And then there's Kristen Herrera. Because of the amount of tourists that travel into the city and county every year, she's become part of a new small business. She's the tour and events director for the Omaha Culinary Tours, and she leads tours of visitors to all of our foodie hotspots. The job provides her a lot of flexibility, and it's allowed Christina to fund her son's hockey obsession and her daughter's dance lessons, and I think we all know how expensive that is. These are just 4 of the more than 17,280 stories that I'll go over now. No, I'm kidding. Of what Omaha tourism looks like. So thanks again for recognizing National Tourism Week and its contribution to our local community. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much. Motion by Marianne Borgeson, seconded by Mike Boyle. Roll call to vote.
Motion passes. All present voting yes.
I don't think Karen Bush is here. I did not see her, but we have recognition of the following employee who's had 17 years of service. Euphemia Jennings, R. Jennings, who has served at the Youth Center, and she is not able to attend today, but we want to recognize Miss Jennings and thank her for her 17 years of service. If there's roll call, please. The next item is item D, and I didn't know if Commissioner Duda, if you wanted.
Motion passes.
Oh, I'm sorry. You got the vote? Okay. Item D on the health center,
Thank you.
Nurses Week.
Thank you. We also have, this is a busy week, we also have a resolution celebrating the nurses at the Douglas County Health Center and the Community Mental Health Center, honoring them during this week as well, which actually Commissioner Borgeson prepared and we will present together.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Duda. Whereas Douglas County employs advanced practice nurses, registered nurses, and licensed practical nurses in several county departments, including the Douglas County Health Center, Community Mental Health Center, Primary Health Care Clinic, and Youth Center, and contracts for nurses at the Department of Corrections. And whereas since 1994, National Nurses Week begins each year on May 6th and ends May 12th, Florence Nightingale's birthday. And
whereas this year's theme, Nurses Inspire, Innovate, Influence, recognizes the depth and breadth of the nursing profession as it meets the different and emerging healthcare needs of the American population. And whereas this week provides an opportunity to celebrate and recognize the commitment, contribution, and caring attitude nurses demonstrate when providing high-quality patient care, now therefore be it resolved by this board that we recognize National Nurses Week and commend Douglas County's employed and contract nurses for their dedicated service to those entrusted to their care, dated today's date. And I would move for the approval.
second?
Okay, a motion by Commissioner Duda, seconded by Commissioner Borgeson. Vote, please.
Mr. Chair.
Motion passes, all present voting yes.
Okay,
PJ.
I'm sorry. Commissioner Borgeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make a quick comment that it's nice to start the meetings off with recognizing, and actually a good portion of our employees, both at the correction facility, but our nurses. These are kind of our silent heroes. They do their jobs. They care for the tough residents that we have. And it's just good that we take a pause and recognize them today, but remember them throughout the year of their hard work and dedication and the work that they do for Douglas County. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Okay, at this time, I'd ask that we recess the Board of Commissioners and go back to our agenda, basically for the Board of Equalization at this time. We have a motion by Commissioner Kraft, seconded by Commissioner Boyle, to recess.
Commissioner, there we go. Motion passes, all present voting yes.
Okay. At this time, the Board of Equalization, approval of the minutes of the Board of Equalization from May 1st. Oh, roll call, sorry. Chad.
Commissioner Rogers is absent. Commissioner Borgeson? Here. Commissioner Boyle? Yes. Commissioner Kavanaugh? Commissioner Duda? Here. Commissioner Kraft? Mr. Chair?
Here. Okay. Approval of the minutes of the Board of Equalization held Tuesday, May 1st.
I would move approval of A and B, if you would. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Commissioner Duda made the motion. Commissioner Kraft seconded it. Please vote.
Commissioner Kavanaugh? Motion passes, all present voting yes.
Item B is call for a meeting Tuesday, May 22nd as the date of a hearing on certified assessment corrections reflecting the additions or of omitted properties on the tax rolls or increased value on the property. Do you have a motion? Did you get B? Okay, citizen comments. If there's anyone here that would like to comment concerning this, we'd appreciate them coming forward at this time. Okay. If not, we have a resolution approving application for tax exemption on motor vehicles, item D.
Move approval of item D and adjourn. Second.
Motion to approve and a second by Commissioner Boyle. Please vote.
Motion passes, all present voting yes.
And I don't think we have any need for executive session concerning this matter. Okay, at this time, I'd ask that we take up the move to adjourn from the Board of Equalization. We got that, so we go into the Board of Corrections.
Commissioner Rogers is absent. Commissioner Borgeson? Here. Commissioner Boyle? Here. Commissioner Kavanaugh? Here. Commissioner Duda? Here. Commissioner Kraft? Here. Mr. Chair?
Approval of the minutes of the Board of Corrections held April 10th, 2018.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Boyle, seconded by Commissioner Duda.
Motion passes, all present voting yes.
And at this time, we could see if there's any citizen that wants to comment concerning the Board of Corrections, if there's anyone here that would like to comment. If not, I'd ask that Mark Foxhall come down and give us his report at this time. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'd just like to start off again by thanking you for recognizing National Correctional Officers and Employees Week. And I think it's a proper testament to what the men and women of the Douglas County Department of Corrections do and the hard work that they engage in every day. And also acknowledging the role that they play in keeping our community safe. So thank you very much for that. In closing, you will find the monthly report for April 2018. Following the 10th month of the fiscal year, we had several months under budget. We were slightly over budget going into following the 10th month of the fiscal year. So call to your attention enclosure number 2, Community Corrections in-house programs. The community of local criminal justice stakeholders are working on a new model for pretrial release. They reached a milestone. Excuse me. Okay. Let me start that again, sir. The Committee of Local Criminal Justice Stakeholders working on a new model for pretrial release reached a milestone by reaching consensus on the plan to pilot the new model. In May, meetings will be held with the judges of both the county and district court, all staff of the Public Defender's Office, County Attorney's Office, and the City Prosecutor's Office. Pending the outcome of those meetings, the current plan is to begin a limited pilot of the new model beginning early in June with a full-scale implementation plan for later in 2018. So this is a focused look on the pretrial population, which, as I have indicated to you in the past, is driving our overall average daily population. So Mike and his staff, Mike Myers, Community Corrections Manager, and his staff have done a really good job of putting this together and meeting with the external stakeholders to address this situation. Also, Community Corrections offered 2 presentations at the American Jail Association's National Conference. The Reentry Services Initiative and Corrections Network television projects were presented. Both presentations were well attended and received positive feedback, and were standing room only in those presentations. So I just want to recognize Community Corrections and their efforts at really doing some innovative things that have received national attention at a national conference. The Department of Corrections is planning its first ever formal graduation ceremony for individuals who achieve their GED while at Department of Corrections. Past graduates have been invited to celebrate and be recognized for their accomplishments. This date is June 1st. You're all invited to attend. It's 1 o'clock, and it will be right here in the legislative chambers. 1 o'clock. 10 o'clock, I'm sorry, 10 o'clock, June 1st, 10 o'clock. Okay. In the legislative chambers. There will be a formal invite coming out. They're still working on that. We're waiting to get a couple of speakers lined up. But it's really kind of a neat experience. You have caps and gowns, and family members will be in attendance. And I must say, these are individuals who have been in our custody, attained their GED, and are coming back to be recognized through a formal process of graduation. So it's not very often that people in custody want to come back to corrections to be recognized. So I think this is really it says a lot for what they feel about their accomplishment and the subsequent success that they've had as a result of those accomplishments. 24/7 alcohol sobriety program, there were 37 new admissions. The average daily participation number was 184. Those numbers continue to rise. There were 3,033 breath tests completed last month. 13 were positive. There were 12 no-shows, and the overall compliance rate for breath testing was 99.2%. So those numbers are pretty solid. 47 individuals were monitored for a total of 1,184 SCRAM monitoring days. There were 0 no-shows, there were no tampering violations, there was no alcohol violations. Overall SCRAM compliance rate was 100%. There were 357 drug tests administered. There were 16 positive violations, there were no drug patch violations, and there were 10 no-shows for drug testing. Work release, those staff at work release admitted 37 individuals, and work release clients donated 219 hours of community service. House arrest admitted 61 individuals. Reentry Assistance Program, or RAP, admitted 18 individuals last month. 2 individuals achieved their GED. Corrections programs or in-house programs at the jail, there were 48 individuals admitted to programs last month, and 3 of those individuals attained a GED. Pretrial services, 22 were referred for priority prosecution, thus saving 199 bed days, and 224 individuals were placed on pretrial last month, monitoring 948 on that program. Move to enclosure number 4. Officers from New Hire Class 18-1 are assigned and working on their own. Officers from New Hire Class 18-2 graduated on the 27th of April and are in the Field Training Officer Program, and officers from candidates from New Hire Class 18-3 will begin their class on May 14th. Also, our recent promotion to CO3, or the rank of sergeant, was CO2 Jesse Torres, and he has been promoted to the rank of sergeant, so congratulations to him. Closure number 5, with respect to our admissions, we had 1,636 admissions last month, 1,611 releases last month. Our high count was 1,314. Low count was 1,247. So our low count's higher than what our population continues to expand. And we're about 1,287, 1,290 now. So our average daily population thus in April was 1,273. Custodial sanction bed days continue to rise at a pretty good clip, at 328 last month. Our violation of probations continue to rise. Our U.S. Marshal population increased last month, and our ICE population increased last month. Our felony pretrial population increased. Our misdemeanor pretrial population increased. The female population increased. Ergo, we're busy. Medical intake screenings, 1,487. H&Ps, 492. Discharge referrals, 431. Initial psych assessments were 143. Mental health assessments, 127. Mental health infirmary placements, 62. Referral to community-based mental health services. There were 4 Board of Mental Health referrals, 2 to long-term psychiatric facility. Thus concludes my report. Are there questions?
Commissioner Kraft.
I think it's a very good report, other than the population increases. Can you please explain what the changes in the pilot program are going to be?
Sure. I would ask Mr. Myers, who's been pushing that program through, to come down and explain what is in the works. Mr. Myers?
Good morning, Commissioners. Michael Myers, the Community Corrections Manager for the Department of Corrections. In short, we are basically conducting a more thorough interview and assessment of each person as they come through the arraignment process. We'll be providing that information to the judges with recommendations for levels of supervision which match the risks and needs that we discover during our assessments. We'll be using validated instruments to verify the level of risk and need. And we'll use a lot of the tools that are already existing in our toolbox, but we haven't applied them in a pretrial setting before as a condition of bond. That includes the GPS monitoring, utilizing the drug and alcohol testing through 24/7, check-ins, possibly classes later on. There are some things that we will be building out in terms of more options for supervision and supportive services over the course of the year. But to start with, we will use basically the existing tools that we have at our disposal, but do them match those resources according to each individual's risks and needs.
Okay. And I do need to issue an apology for June 1st graduation. I think that's an important event. I'd love to be there, but it's my 48th anniversary, and I have a feeling my wife might have other plans. And Scram, I think this is the first time we've had 000 on it, isn't it?
There may have been one other month that has happened. It's a pretty rare achievement to get. It shows that the program works. And we just had our 1,000th admission to the 24/7 program last month as well, and it's 4 years.
Did you set off fireworks for that?
I actually checked the data a few days later and then realized that we were at 1,000.
Okay.
So.
And explain what custodial sanctioned bed days are, please.
Sure, that's part of a language in LB 605 that when a probation violator, for whatever reason, is not compliant with whatever the orders of probation are, then that individual is sent back to jail for a period of time.
Thank you.
So we're tracking those days because they continue to increase. As LB 605 has put more people on probation due to PRS and other changes in the law, then more people on probation means going to be more violations, and so those are coming our way. That's driving our population, which is why that number is here.
That makes sense. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Duda.
Thank you. I was, and I think a few other commissioners were perhaps pretty struck by Attorney David Herzog's presentation to us the other day about how many, I mean, the debtor's prison thing, you know, how many people are in jail because they can't make bond. And so I'm so pleased that you are being as aggressive as you can in addressing the security needs of each and every one of these. I think that's so important. I hope that this board, and we've got our lobbyists here today, I'm fascinated with what Mr. Herzog was saying, and I hope that we will pursue that legislatively next year. I think that would be a good step, but in the meantime, I'm thrilled to see that you're pursuing each and every person to assess their risk and determine what's best for them. It's great.
Thank you. Mike and his staff have done a wonderful job with that, and we just came back from national conference, and a lot of the big jails around the country, and we're considered a large jail by virtue of the fact that we're over 1,000 beds, so a lot of large jails are also talking about bail reform and no cash bail, and there's legislation pushing out in several states across the country that really working hard to address the bail issue because the populations are really spiking in some jurisdictions, as in ours.
Thank you.
Okay, did you, Commissioner Borges?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Commissioner Duda hit on a question or a comment that I wanted to talk about too, and that was, is there a way to in your report, start to place those that are sitting out there sentencing their bails in jail in our book? And the reason I say that is Commissioner Rogers and I attended the National Association of Black County Officials meeting this past week, and there was a lot of conversation about that conversation that we just had at our board meeting with Mr. Herzog. And so we will be bringing something back to the board probably on the 22nd about it. But in the meantime, is there a way that we could get those numbers, take a look at them, and also split it by gender? I'm interested to see the female population and what's happening with that population and what we can do. There's a program called I was trying to look it up to make sure I was going to say it right, the 3-day count or 3 count, that I'll be bringing more information back to the board about. But as you talked, you might have heard some of that at your conference too, because there's a lot of movement across the country on that. But if we could get those numbers and maybe take a better look at them, that may at least start our course of action here on what we want to do.
We can definitely put something in the next and subsequent reports.
Okay, great.
Yes,
Thanks.
and chart it out.
Thanks.
And break it out by gender.
Thanks.
And as some of the data I sent you, and break it out by charge as well, if you like.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Anything else, Commissioner
No,
Borges?
thank you.
Commissioner Kraft?
Quick question. Did you see David Herzog's presentation last week?
No, I've talked to David a
Okay.
couple of times.
Okay,
several
good.
times.
Then you're all
And he sent me his material.
very good. I had a feeling he did.
Yes, we talked.
Thank you.
Yes.
Commissioner Boyle?
Yeah, Dave was talking, and I saw, anyway. No, it was a fabulous presentation and very much on point. I kind of laid back today because a lot, the questions that were asked were the same thing I was wondering about too, right to the T. But there's one other thing that you did for me about a couple years ago or so, and that was, and it's probably a lot of difficulty, but take a snapshot of who's entering the facility. And it's pretty eye-opening because you get some people that are really minor offenses, and I don't know how long they're staying and all this. And I have to say that you have and your staff have done an incredible job to set up ways to divert, to send these people off into another direction rather than jail. I know you have people in the facility from probation. You've got social workers inside. You're working on housing for those that are homeless. I mean, what you're doing is way beyond what you're charged with, but what you're doing is you're humanizing the system, and I really appreciate that because, you know, you have a word that you use every time you have a new class, and I'm always honored to be present, but you always talk about respecting who's there. And these are our neighbors that are there, that ran a stop sign, that did something stupid, and they are respected, which is terrific. You've inhaled that, and the union is really tuned into that too, which goes a long way in having a facility that's well-run like it is. And plus the opportunities that you provide, GED coming up June 1st, that's unbelievable. That's really good. So I just want to tell you, you're absolutely on the right track. And I really encourage you to keep doing what you're doing because in case you haven't noticed, you've got the support of this board. I will speak for them. They are, and we are enthusiastically behind what you're doing and your methods. Thank you.
Sir, it starts with the staff. We have great staff. We walk through the facility, and the things that they endure, and the professionalism that they maintain, right. It starts with the staff. And I can't thank them enough for what they do, particularly in the trying times of being understaffed and with the population being so high. And we get a lot of compliments from people that walk through the facility. And when we go to a national conference and we compare ourselves with similarly situated facilities, we're doing a lot. And
it's a great
sat
team.
down with some of the staff from LA County, which is a 19,000 bed facility, and we're doing some things that are innovative to in LA County. So very, very proud of what the folks at the Department of Corrections are doing. I know I am.
Thank you.
Anyone else wanting to comment? Mark, I visited with Mark about in the next week or 2 or 3 that maybe some of us could meet with him, or he may meet with all of us at different times and kind of talk about what ideas might be there. I know, Commissioner Boyle, you've worked closely with the correction facility, but whatever we can do to help and be supportive, we want to do. I did visit with Sean Kelly. I made a call last week, and I know Sean's here this morning, about possibly having our breakfast with the senators in August. If he thought that was a good idea, he'll probably be up here later. And he thought it was probably a good idea to meet earlier maybe and see if we can do that, or September, so that we talk with them at the appropriate time and try to work on a couple of our priorities, and definitely that population and what we can do with the bails and so on is totally a priority. And it isn't just in Omaha that you're seeing this increase. It's all over the country, and I know you know that way better than I do. But I want to do everything we possibly can to assist you and make that one of our top priorities, along with mental health.
That's a good idea, if I may.
Yes.
I'll talk to Karen and try to get that set up where all the commissioners can attend. It'll be an open meeting. And
Okay.
we'll go from there.
That'd
Thanks.
be great.
Good idea.
That will be important given the next legislative cycle that's coming up and given what's percolating nationally as well.
Okay, and Commissioner Borgeson?
Commissioner Chair, and Commissioner Boyle, one of the things that I tossed around with staff a couple weeks ago was having a local, state, and federal delegation meeting. And I know it could be a scheduling nightmare, but if we don't try,
Right.
we'll never know if we'd be able to do it. And the reason I say that is because we know that the mental health issue that we just talked about last week, and Representative Bacon was here, Congressman Bacon was here and signed on to the IMD issue with mental health, the Institute for Mental Disease issue. But there's probably a handful of items that we could really focus on and get specific on with us and the state and our federal delegation. And so I'd like to maybe work with you, if that's okay, to
That'd be
try
great.
to get that scheduled. Again, it is a scheduling nightmare, I know, but if we could get at least a couple of them to sit down with us and talk to us, and we can come up with the agenda specific, I think it would be a very good thing to start.
I think so too. And if I could add too, we have the sheriff and the Omaha Police Department, others that are involved, they deal with people 24 hours a day. I'm sure they'd have some really good suggestions on what to do about people that they have to pick up and where they would like to see them go instead of incarceration, perhaps. So we'll get some information from the pros and bring every pro together that we can, and then have the elected officials as well. Not that we're not pros, but the people who are in the business.
Thank you. And Mark Foxhall, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Commissioners, and also, as always, thank you for your support, particularly during this difficult times for us.
Okay. Motion by Mark Kraft to adjourn and maybe to go back and convene. And Commissioner Boyle seconded that motion.
Give us one moment here. Okay, thank you. Motion passes, all present voting yes.
Okay. We don't need to have a roll call because we just recessed. The minutes and claims, do I have a motion to approve A and B? Motion by Commissioner Boyle, seconded by Mark Kraft. Please vote.
Motion passes, all present voting yes.
We have the consent agenda at this time, and it's A through E. Commissioner Boyle?
Yes, I had a question. Let's see, I think it's in here. It was about the, oh yeah, it's D, and I don't know if anyone's here from Human Resources or not. I'll just ask it later, but I wonder, many times there are funds that are unused in these accounts, these health savings accounts, and from personal experience, I found about $1,000 that I had lost. It goes back when I didn't realize I had an account a couple of years ago, and so anyway, I lost the money. It goes to the federal government. I'd like to know. I'd like to be sure we're notifying employees of what is left in these accounts. Are we doing that, Patrick? Do you know?
I would check with the HR to see what the process is, because you have until March the following year. It's the flexible spending account.
Right.
And then there's also a daycare account, dependent care account, and so they can spend it till March, and they can go online and actually see their balances as well. So I'll check with HR to see if they do any kind of proactive notifications.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you very much.
I think you can carry a certain amount
Right.
forward for the entire year too.
But you can't if you don't know about it, and I didn't know about it.
Right.
I wasn't paying attention.
That's a good point, and I do think it's important for our employees to know that.
Thank you.
So we do have that motion in a second.
Yes, we do.
I vote
And
yes.
we could vote at this time if there's not some other comments.
Okay. Commissioner Kavanaugh. Motion passes, all present voting yes.
Okay, at this time, if there are any citizens that would like to comment, this is the opportunity to do that. Is there anyone here who would like to come forward and make any comments?
Mr. Chair, if I could just have a point of privilege at this
Sure.
juncture. I just wanted to, I should have said this during Nurses Week or Corrections meeting, but it slipped my mind. But if you remember our community mental health program, the co-occurring intensive outpatient program that presented at our Board of Trustees, and then the folks came here and presented, and we had some of the recipients of the program speak to us. And they submitted an application for the 2018 NACO Achievement Award and was granted that award under the criminal and justice and public safety category. So we just want to send out our congratulations to them, and we'll get a formal letter written on that, but I wanted to mention that today. That was big stuff.
Thank you, Commissioner Borgeson. Okay, we don't have any presentations to my knowledge, or public hearings. So the next item is committee discussion. Finance, Commissioner Boyle,
As submitted.
as submitted. And Mr. Lorenz, are there any comments you might have concerning the budget?
Today, the sheriff is going to come in and present his budget, given that his requested budget is above target. Then no meeting next week. Then in 2 weeks, we're going to have corrections and the health center and community mental health come in, and that will be the all the presentations we'll get. And after that, we will have rolled up, and we could get into the discussion of how we're going to do the final budget. So,
Okay.
and we should get that resolved in June.
Good morning, Sheriff, and I see that Mr. Wheeler's passing out some items for us.
Good morning, Tim Dunning, Douglas County Sheriff. With me this morning is obviously Chief Deputy Tom Wheeler and two other individuals that Chief Wheeler is mentoring in the budget process. Captain Wayne Hudson right behind me, and Lieutenant Will Wren, who's somewhat shy of the county board. He hasn't been close to you as much, so he's gonna stand in the back. We had a little glitch. We initially followed the call letter and submitted our budget, and we received some new information that DC West schools and Bennington schools now want SROs in their schools. So we made a request to Joe to pull our budget back and adjust those numbers and that information, and Chief Wheeler will get into the exact details of that, but I just want to let you know we appreciate Joe giving us the opportunity to make that adjustment. So let me introduce Chief Deputy Tom Wheeler.
Good morning, Commissioners. Tom Wheeler, Chief Deputy Sheriff. I'd like to take a moment and acknowledge Dr. Melissa Polonsik, the Superintendent of DC West Community Schools, who's with us today, and Dr. Matt Blomenkamp, the principal at Bennington High School. Thank you both for attending. I'll start by briefly going over our budget request, and when we're finished, be happy to answer any questions you may have. Our current year budget is about $16.4 million for the fiscal 18 year. The target that was identified by Finance is a flat budget plus approved pay increases, and that comes out at about $16.54 million. Our fiscal 19 request is just under $16.8 million, and that request is about $250,000 higher than the target that was identified by Finance. So where does our budget come from? What does it represent? Well, mainly personnel. For this particular budget, 93% of our request covers personnel expenditures, and about 7% covers the non-personnel items. For the additional requests, they're made up of about 4 different areas. The first area is a Motorola records management system. This is a project that's been about 10 years in the making. We've identified a funding source for it through seized asset funds, and the project was about $1 million to implement. It's an integrated product with the CAD system in 911, so that all data that is captured from the time a call is made through the report, the approval process, the investigation, and records is all captured electronically. It also allows us to gain additional statistical information and data that we had to do hand sorting before this will take care of it. And it really brings us up into the 21st century in terms of what a modern police force should be doing with their records. Our second item is to add 2 additional school resource officers. As the sheriff mentioned, both DC West and Bennington Public Schools have requested that we add school resource officers into their school district. The funding for these resource officers will be paid for in part by the school districts themselves. The third item is $16,000 to train and equip a new polygraph examiner. Our polygraph examiner is scheduled to retire in the next few years, so we need to identify a new examiner. That examiner has to train under the current one and get so many tests and hours in before they become certified. So we need to do that in the next year. And our final item is a budget item for active shooter training here at the courthouse and civic center. We did this about 2 or 3 years ago, and we'd like to do it again, keep our skills sharp. I found out since our budget request that there is Homeland Security grant money that is available for this. And if the finance director prefers, we can remove that from our budget request and handle that as a supplemental request at a later time. It's what we've done in the past, but at the time of our submission, I wasn't aware that the grant had been approved.
$12,000.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
This graph represents our budget and how it compares with our payroll. And over the past, since 2010, we've averaged about 94% of our overall budget covers payroll and personnel expenses. As we go back in 2010, we were at 133 deputies, and we had been at about that number leading up to that year. As you may recall, we went through a period of about 4 years where we did not hire any deputies because of the economic downturn. We ended up dropping to about 123 deputies by 2013. Last year, the board approved 2 additional deputies to deal with concerns at the courthouse and security, and that brings our current number up to 130 deputies. This next slide looks at our overall budget and revenue projections. From 2013 to 2018, our adjusted budget has increased by about 3.6 per year, and our revenues have increased by about the same amount, 3.6%. I want to take a moment and look at some population, some demographics. I know these are always questions that come up with the sheriff's office. And we took a look at the last 3 years. This information was provided by County GIS, showing the population totals in the unincorporated areas of Douglas County. As you can see, in 2016 is 72,000, and the estimated total for 2018 is about 80,000. We went back and took a look at some historical data. In 1990, the population of unincorporated Douglas County was 47,180. Today, it's estimated to be about 80,740. And since 1990, the city of Omaha has conducted and completed 28 annexations. That's added about 74,000 people to the city of Omaha's population, not to include Elkhorn. And from 2010 to 2018, we've seen the residential building permits, these are for both single and multi-family dwellings, steadily start to increase. So in the last couple of years, we've averaged about 1,400 permits per year for these particular areas. Again, from 2010 to 2017, using MAPA's population factor, it added just under 22,000 people to the unincorporated areas of Douglas County. What we see is that most areas of population growth in Douglas County are outside the city of Omaha. Most areas of population decline are in the city of Omaha. This is the most recent map that MAPA could produce from 2012 to 2016 of Douglas County population trends. And what we see is the green areas represent areas of growth. The white or maybe light pink shades are areas of decline, and the tannish yellow are areas of, that are status quo that maybe have a slight increase or decrease, but fairly minor changes. So to summarize our budget requests for this year, the request overall is about 1.5% higher than the target that's been identified for us. Most of the requested increase is related to adding school resource officers in Bennington and Valley Waterloo, and to maintain a new records management system that has been purchased. Like all technology and software, they come with maintenance agreements that keep the system working. And finally, about half the cost of the SROs will be offset by the school districts. And with that, I'll take your questions.
Okay, appreciate that. Commissioner Boyle?
Yes. I'd like to ask about the sheriff budget request, page 2. Did I hear you say that it does include the pay increases that have been, or anticipated increases?
Yes, it does.
Okay, that's good. Then I wanted to ask about the record management system. Is there and I know that the Omaha Police has done something too, you know more about it than I do, but are these, is a system that, excuse me, is their system or your system compatible with other law enforcement agencies, or does it need to be? I know that you have other systems of ways to communicate with other law enforcement agencies. Is that necessary that this system be compatible or able to talk to the other systems?
Yeah, it couldn't be compatible with Omaha. I mean, there's some features that will be compatible, but Omaha, rather than buy a on-the-shelf type system, built their own.
Okay.
So that's kind of a difficulty
Yeah.
for us and the county attorney and everybody else. But we're making our system compatible so that, for example, the county attorney will be able to download case information rather than us have to make hard copies and send
Right.
them down there.
But you
And
can't,
that would be the same with photos and so on.
can the county attorney do that with the Omaha Police Departments?
I don't know.
Okay, thanks, I appreciate that. I want to make a comment about the school resource officers. I think that's a really good investment. I think that's real smart. Needs to be done, so I just want to say that at the outset.
If I could stop you just for
Yeah.
a minute, Commissioner Boyle, Captain Hudson just had a conversation yesterday with Elkhorn Schools, and they're building a new high school
Right.
out west, and they have told us that they're going to be asking for an SRO for that new high school. OPS is building a new high school, 156 in height, I think, something like that.
Somewhere out in
And
France.
That'll be in Douglas County as well. I'm not sure what the completion date of that high school is.
Okay.
So those are on the horizon. We're not counting for those yet because they haven't made a formal request, and we don't know when their building project's
Well,
going
you can only respond to those requests, and I don't see how you can turn them down, to tell you the truth. I want to ask you about, on page 4, the staffing and so forth. How many deputies do you have that it's required by state law to secure the courtrooms inside when cases are going on and so forth, whatever it is you do? And if you don't have it this time, it's okay, but I'm curious about how many.
Yeah, state law doesn't mandate that you have X number, but here's the dynamics. You've got to have somebody that is providing security for the courtroom.
Right.
You have to have somebody that is then going to bring prisoners in, take prisoners out. You have situations where you have high-profile gang trials, for example. And actually, if we had more than 3 of those at one time, we'd be in trouble. So we're pretty much minimally staffed for the courthouse.
Yeah.
We've tried to be this is my 24th year. We've never been over budget during that whole period of time, so I think we've tried to be good stewards of the taxpayers' money, and have always had a good working relationship with Steve Walker and now Joe Lorenz. So,
Absolutely. Well, and I was curious too about the people who check at the doors when they come in. Those are not in this list, are they? Because they're
the non-sworn.
Okay. Oh, they're non-sworn. Okay. All right. And that's a contract with the building commission, right?
No, not for ESOs. That's for building security officers that do.
Are they separate? Are they additional?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a separate contract.
Got it.
We still account for those.
We do. They're in the numbers that you see there for non-sworn, those
Got it.
folks.
Okay, that's great. Okay. Then I was wondering, we talked some time ago, and this is not a big cost savings, but I'm not sure what really does, talking about the sheriff and the Omaha Police Department drawing a line somewhere at 144th Street. And of course, now the city's building a 5th precinct out in France somewhere. So anyway, way out to Elkhorn, which is fine. But I don't know whether it's fruitful to talk anymore about that because of that new precinct being built out there. But it seems like it would be efficient, and you know more about it than I do, but drawing a line, and you would take care of West, and Elkhorn would love to see you. I know, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I think at your request
Yeah.
and at PJ's request, we've put that information together probably more than once.
Yeah.
My indication, the last conversation I had with Marty Bielik from the mayor's office was that the mayor had that conversation with the chief. The chief didn't want to do it, and he didn't think the conversation was going to continue because of that.
Okay. All right, well, I may call you just informally and get another copy of that study and drive up your Xerox bill. But anyway, I thank you very much. I think it's a reasonable thing, and it was great seeing you last night at the Rib Place.
Before Commissioner Kraft talks, I'd just comment, Commissioner Boyle and Sheriff, on that statement, of the West Precinct. I think the cost in the newspaper talked about $10 million. Am I correct on that amount?
I think more.
The West Precinct, we were just told last week that the West Precinct is not going to tentatively be open until the last quarter of 2019.
Last quarter of 18?
19.
19. The only thing, it sure seems like it'd be wise to take the steps that you mentioned, Commissioner Boyle, to try to work together. It seems like it'd be helpful to both the city and the county.
Yeah.
But again, I don't have the expertise you have, but, it's worth continuing to pursue at least, I think, and see where we could go with it. Commissioner Kraft?
On page 2, the Motorola record management system. Is this the first year we'll be funding
Yeah, we paid for the system out of seizure, is that correct? Yeah.
Right,
We
yes.
paid for the system out of seizure, but now we're faced with.
This is the first year for the annual maintenance. So
Yes.
Yes, it is.
so that'll be a recurring expense in your budget.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Boyle?
I wanted to ask about the seizure funds. And I know that you have some discretion, but then you don't have total discretion on where they can go. And you did use some in this budget, which is great. Is there any possibility you can squeeze some more out of there, or is there any other, if you could, that'd be helpful, but again, I know you can't, you can't use it for things that you normally would fund, but
Correct.
if you can, it'd be great. But I guess you've already looked at that, but if you can find a couple $100,000, it'd be great.
Personnel in particular is an area that you're not allowed to use the seized assets for to fund personnel expenditures.
Right.
So what we'll end up using this year's allocation for is computer purchases and other equipment that the department uses. As you know, law enforcement, it's heavy equipment and training. And so a lot of what we do in that area comes out of the seized assets fund.
Okay. One last thing I want to mention is that Chief Deputy Wheeler attended these meetings, and I was there too with the mayor's chief of staff about trying to come up with a method to work. So I appreciate your participation. It's been a while, but I don't know if I ever thanked you, so I appreciate it.
Thank you. We continue to be open to that,
Great.
those discussions.
Thanks.
Commissioner Duda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Interesting presentation. A couple of points and questions. How many school resource officers do we currently have, do you think, on your department? Okay, so this would be going from 4 to 6. And is every one of them on the same financial arrangement that the school pays 50% and we pay the other half?
Good.
Captain Hudson, no, Millard Public Schools, they do an hour for hour, so they bill us per hour. We like the system we were going with DC West and Bennington. Same thing we have with Elkhorn, which is figure out what the total with the compensation and benefits, and we split that in half with the school district.
Very good. All right, thank you. Thank you, Captain Hudson. Yeah, I think that's something we kind of have to do. Anytime we add personnel, that is a strain on the budget, but sometimes you just got to do it. Your figures on the population increase in unincorporated Douglas County is always interesting. There's always a perception that every time Omaha annexes, that must mean there's fewer people left out in unincorporated Douglas County. And I can tell you anecdotally that the call volume of all of the volunteer fire departments this year is just going through the roof. I don't know how long Bennington's going to be able to remain all volunteer with the call volume they have is just staggering. So those of us outside of Omaha recognize that there's a whole lot more going on outside of the city than there has been.
Yeah, even with those map of figures, they're figuring 2.6 for per residential unit, but when you come to the multi-family dwellings, they don't have a correct number for that. So whatever we're figuring is probably low. Because if you had a family of 4 or a family of 6 living in an apartment, you know,
Sure.
you would still be only accounting for that lower number. And you don't know by building permit how many units they're planning on. You just know that there's a building going up and it's going to be X square footage and that sort of thing.
Your population that you are providing the primary law enforcement service for is larger than most counties in Nebraska. It would be interesting sometime to compare your staffing on the road patrol and what's now Captain Hudson's responsibility, how that compares to other counties of the same size. So thank you.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thank you. Sheriff Dunning, you do a good job, and I want to commend you and your department. I met with you and your staff for discussions on this school security
Yes.
situation. I mean, we're suffering a rash of these nationally, of mass shootings in our school of our children, and so obviously it's a concern to us. I have school children, and so it's a particular concern to me, and I'm glad to see that, you know, you've taken some steps. I just wanted to maybe get some idea of where we are right now. So if I understand it, we currently have 4 of these resource officers deployed. Is that correct?
School resource officers, yes.
And what
Yeah,
school?
We're at Elkhorn South, we're at Millard West, Alfonso Davis Middle School on military.
And Horizon.
Okay. And in this proposal, request that we do the same at Bennington and Waterloo, is that correct?
Bennington and DC West. And DC West,
DC West, yeah.
if correct me if I'm wrong, is going to be a shared responsibility. That school resource officer would go in between Waterloo schools and Valley schools.
Okay. How long have we had these 4 already deployed at these schools?
Years. Millard West has been several years. Elkhorn South since the high school was built. Alfonso Davis, which is a middle school, since it was built. And Horizon High School, which is a Millard Public School, since it was built.
You know, when we discuss this, obviously this is good. I'm in favor of this. I think this is a step in the right direction. The bulk of Douglas County school children, though, don't live in those school districts, and I know that it's not your primary responsibility, but what we talked about was discussions, collaborations, whatever, between Douglas County Sheriff and the other law enforcement agencies in our county that do have school districts, you know, Ralston, of course, and Valley, and certainly Omaha Public Schools and Omaha Police Department. Are we having discussions with these folks in terms of, you know, what we can do? Because, you know, you're doing great as far as we're going, but, you know, the bulk of the students are not under this program. So I'm wondering if we're doing some liaison with those folks.
I believe there's an SRO, kind of an SRO association, probably not formalized, but there is dialogue.
Okay.
That goes in between, and the Attorney General has also assembled a bunch of people, myself, Todd Schmatter, can't think of the name now, he's the head of the UNL police, Terry Wagner from Lancaster County,
Right.
Several to kind of, the Attorney General wants to formalize some training and some protocols to get more into threat management, and so that we have a model.
Right.
And so I think that's coming very soon. The model I think they'll adopt is probably the one that Owen Yardley, the police chief of UNL Police, Campus Police, has a model there that I think is going to work real well, where it's It's a decision maker from the school, a psychologist, and two law enforcement, and part of the law enforcement have to be threat management trained.
Good. These resource officers that we have deployed and that you're requesting additionals, what exactly do they do at the schools? What's their job?
Yeah, they're actually, they become a member of the staff. In fact, we have the schools be part of the interview team to help select who's going to be the resource officer for that school, so that person has a good mesh with their staff. I guess, Wade, you want to explain that a little more from SROs?
It's, and actually, I'll just read you right off what we have on here. It says, let me get right here. The SRO serves as liaison between DCSO and the school. The presence of an SRO is intended to accomplish two goals. First, the work of an SRO is intended to promote the reduction of crime and violence in the school. Second, the SRO aim is to break down barriers that often exist between youth and law enforcement. So liaison, help with crime reduction, but also liaison between the staff, the parents, and the students.
Captain, I appreciate that, thank you. So these SROs, is that
Correct,
terminology?
school resource officers.
Right, are armed, is
Correct.
that correct? So in the case of, responding to what have been this rash of mass shootings at schools across our country, they would respond on site to that during the schools, while the schools are open, right?
Correct. One of the duties is if you have an active threat situation where someone's actively killing students or teachers, things of that nature, the old days of waiting outside for individuals to show up, that's gone out the window. Now it's go in and neutralize the threat. So one requirement that I have for my school resource officers is they all have to be rifle certified. The school districts know that, so that we'll have weapons on site in vehicles wherever they're going to be at, secure, so we can take care of any threat that may happen at the school.
Thank you. And are they uniformed?
Correct. Same uniform as you'll see on as a patrol deputy.
Very good. So the cost that we have here is half of the cost that would be generated by the addition of 2 additional SROs, is that correct?
Correct.
And the school districts present here today are assuming the other half of that cost indefinitely, correct?
Correct.
I'm seeing a nodding there from one of the directors, so I take that as a yes. I think that's great, and I want to commend you for getting in front of this. This is a horrible problem that we have nationally, not only in our schools, but the mass shooting that happened in Omaha, Nebraska, happened at Von Maur department store. And so, how do we even protect against public forums? I also want to commend you for stepping up the security of this facility, which is basically our public forum, by the active shooter program financing that you're requesting. I only have 2 other questions. In the graph here, you do show a percentage increase of your adjusted budget from 2013 to 2018, and it's about 3.6 annually, right? On the previous page, you have the payroll versus total budget, and the bulk of what your payroll, or your bulk of what your budget is payroll. But I was just wondering, over that same period of time, your FTEs, sworn and unsworn folks on the staff of the Sheriff's Department, has not really gone up at all, although the population that you're serving has increased. But what was the percent, if you don't know today, just get back to me on this, the percent of payroll increase over that same period of time? Does it match that basically 3.6 annual overall budget increase? Is it less? Is it the same? Is it more?
I don't have that answer for you today, and I will look at it. I can tell you that since 2013, we've added 10 deputies to the department, and that would certainly factor in to the 3.6% increase, average increase.
Yeah, I saw that. My rough math showed that, sworn and unsworn, I just lumped them together. Maybe I should have broken them out, but the non-sworn were 74 then, and they're 81 now, and the sworn were 133, and they're 130 now, according to this graph. Am I reading that right?
Yes.
Okay. So that would be roughly 207 total to 211, a little slight increase, but is that about right?
Well, you're looking at, I'm sorry, you're looking at 2010. I guess I was referring to 2013 where we were at 123.
Yeah, you had 133 sworn. and
No,
then-
I'm sorry. Under the year 2013, that's the year I was comparing here.
Oh, I see.
I used
I see.
2010 as just a
Okay.
reference, of
Very good.
historical reference.
Sorry, I was looking at the next column over. Yep, thanks. And that population increase, I mean, it's fairly dramatic in the last couple of years from 72,000 to 80,000. But it's huge in the years from 1990 to 2018 where it goes from 47,000 to 80,000. That's like a, I don't know, 80% increase of population that you're serving. Is that right?
Yeah, building was down for a period of time.
Okay. Thank you.
You know, I also want to mention that we've asked Kim Bavazzo, our grant writer, to seek out some grants on SROs, and I would think with the national sentiment on SROs, there'd be some grants out there, but right now there isn't. So if one becomes available, we'll certainly be applying for it.
Well, we really appreciate it. I can tell you as a parent who sends kids off to school every day, I mean, it's a real daily concern for all of us. You can't pick up the paper any week without finding something regarding this. So thanks for what you're doing, and the more that we can do, the better. And I commend the school districts for stepping up too. Thank you.
Commissioner Borgeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too want to add, Tim, you've done a great job as sheriff, and, you know, in my district there, you represent and service probably more than most except for Commissioner Duda's, and so we get great accolades on the service that you give out in those areas, and we appreciate that very much. I did have a chance to talk with the schools about this, and while it saddens me that we have to do this, we have to do this. Regardless of what your population is, there are threats that happen in smaller schools, and we have to be prepared for that. And so thank you for stepping up and recognizing that and working with the schools to make sure that we have the SROs in those schools as well in Western Douglas County. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Go ahead, Commissioner Kraft.
Yeah, first I'm going to do some commentary, then I have some questions. You know, we as county commissioners, part of our job is risk assessment. What do we buy in personnel? What do we buy in insurance to protect our citizens, our community, and enhance it? It takes, to serve one full-time position per 24-hour shift, 6 or 7 officers. Is that correct?
What was that again?
For a 24/7 operation, one person per shift takes 6 or 7 officers.
Yes.
Right, okay.
I
So
think we account for 5, yes.
5, okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, when the public looks at the numbers, they don't realize how thin those numbers spread, okay? Getting back to that risk assessment, looking at where shootings have taken place and the cost to the school district and the sheriff's office and the police department, the initial cost is millions of dollars, even if one person is injured.
Correct.
Okay? That's part of our risk assessment. What do we fund? What do we withhold funding from? Are we willing to take that additional risk? Well, the initial expense is millions of dollars. The long-term expense is injury to humans, loss of life, emotional stress, PSTD, all these associated things that also add to expenses in treatment, in society, family issues. You know, I would hate to lose one of my children. Matter of fact, I don't know how somebody can bear that burden. Can you use retired sheriffs for the school resource officers?
Yeah, well, I can tell you that we have considered it, and it's not off the table. But for them to be retired county employees, they can only work 20 hours a week. So that's, the continuity of that is kind of the problem. I guess to look at it another way, look at Millard West, it's 2,000 plus students. And we have one person assigned there. That's bigger than most cities in the state of Nebraska.
True.
And they have full police departments. So I mean, that's just another way of looking at it.
Yes. OPS, how do they handle paying their school resource officers? Is that a split also?
Go ahead. You're probably more up to speed on that.
And back to your question, as far as retired
Yes.
deputies, like the sheriff said, they can only work 20 hours. And what we want to do is get away from using deputies and police officers at the end of their career and put them in school districts. We've seen probably across the nation right now where that's been done and it doesn't work so well. You want individuals in there who wants to be there, who has the training, who keeps up on the training, active shooter training, things of that nature, that can go in and take care of any threat. But to your question, the Omaha Police Department, they use a combination of full-time officers and some recently retired officers to fill their SRO positions.
How do they fund it? The SROs in the Omaha Public School and other school districts, is it split like we're doing?
No, I think most of theirs are per hour.
Per hour,
Correct.
okay. But the per hour, is it paid from the police department or the school district?
The school district pays the police department pays the employees.
Okay, thank you. And a question about seizure funds. I know that a few years back, there were some changes in the way the federal government allowed the allocation of seizure funds, and then it's changed again. How's that affected your funding in the seizure fund department?
Our current seizure account is around $700,000 balance. We have a final payment to make to Motorola out of that, so it'll put us around $500,000. To give you some historical perspective, that account's been as high as $9 million. In the last few years, we've seen around $250,000 annually coming in seizure, where in years past it may be $1 million or more.
Is the federal government keeping more of the money?
The rules have changed back to the old rules where the splits were 80-20. However, it's constantly, we're adapting to the criminal element. And when they see that we're taking their drug money off the street, they find different ways. And so we're always playing catch up with them in that regard.
Okay. And I know that regarding seizure funds, in national news a few years back, there were some funds. Oh, okay, thank you. There were some funds that were not, they were seized, not returned when they were found out to be non-related to criminal activity. How do we monitor that?
Every seizure goes through a federal forfeiture process through federal courts. That money is held and distributed by federal agencies.
So if a person is tried and found not guilty, they get the money back without a lot of hassle?
It depends on the circumstances of why the money was seized, but there is due process involved in that. And if the money is not related, doesn't have a drug nexus, then it's returned.
But is it returned easily? Can the person access their money in a timely manner, or do they have to fight for yours? That's what I thought.
Well, I've not heard complaints, but I can say that we're not involved in that end of the process, so I just don't have good
Okay.
information for you.
Thank you, because it's an issue that's bothered me for a long, long time, and I know it's made national news. I can understand the seizure, but I don't understand when somebody's found not guilty, the difficulty I've read about their returning, getting the return of their assets. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Boyle.
I was going to say, I think it's happened in other, but I don't think you've been involved in it. There was a woman who had worked for years in a retail department store or something. She saved every dime, and she had about $600,000 in cash. And she's traveling along the road, and she didn't signal when she turned. She got pulled over, and so they seized the cash. And it took her forever to get it back. She finally did. But that's the sort of thing. I mean, that's just really an odd situation.
Yeah, I can tell you, Mike, locally, the feds make us show nexus.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a safeguard against that happening.
Yeah. I don't think it's a big
Just
problem.
because you got a
but-
lot of money in your pocket doesn't mean
Yeah,
we need to take it, but we have to show some nexus to some criminal activity.
right. I don't think it's a big problem myself. But Mark, you have to start over, Mark, because your microphone was off.
Yeah. I'll talk for the next 2 hours because my mic was off. I'll replace everything.
I'll be taking a nap.
No, I understand that I haven't read any cases or heard of any problems here in Omaha or Douglas County. But it does cause concern, and I think we need to all be aware of what could happen. So, thank you.
Okay. I want to be sure if the principal, the officials from the school have any comments they want to make, that maybe to come up at this time if you'd like. I just wanted to thank you for being here. And I had a couple comments.
See how smart they are?
Yeah. They're smart.
That's why they're teachers.
Yeah, that's right. Good,
You haven't heard my comments yet.
good move.
Okay, one thing I was going to ask, on page 7, you had not including the annexation of Elkhorn. I'm just curious why that.
Well, Elkhorn wasn't necessarily an annexation. It just wasn't reflected in the number of SID annexations, which is what I was
Okay.
calculating.
All right, then, kind of a strange question. As I understand it, the city of Omaha on the resource officers isn't really sharing the cost. The schools are paying 100%.
I'm not aware of that they're paying 100. When you say hourly rate, that I don't know that covers the entire cost of the officer. They're just paying for every hour that they're at the school.
I'd like to make sure that I ask Patrick and some of our other people here, especially Joe Lorenz, to maybe check that out for us, because we have one source of revenue, the county, with our property taxes. We don't have the sales tax and other things, and I'd like to be aware of that. I think it's worth checking out. So we'll work on that, and I appreciate your presentation. I also, Sheriff, appreciate your passion for what you do.
Thank you.
Very, very nice, and your people. So we'll work on that just to get that information for the county. Okay, thank you again. And again, thanks to the school officials for being here. Okay, I want to be sure, yes.
School officials, you know you can bring your classes down for educational facility. Yes, exactly.
We're on the Zoom for the presentation at the beginning about tourism and bringing money. So
Okay.
all our kids are at the zoo this morning.
Good.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Mary Ann, did you have anything on human resources you wanted to mention on your committee?
No, just the report as presented.
Okay, and then what I'd like to do is invite two very patient people down. That'd be Sean Kelly and Julia, if she'd like to come down, or just Sean, on legislative matters. Good morning, Sean.
Good morning, Chairman Morgan and members of the Board of Commissioners. Sean Kelly, 2804 South 87th Avenue, here this morning to provide you with the 2018 legislative report. The good news is the Nebraska legislature has adjourned, sign and die. As you know, that happened on April 18th, which was the 60th legislative day, the last day of the session, which this year they actually had to use to pass 20 some odd bills on final reading, which gave Governor Ricketts the opportunity to pocket veto a handful of items, which he did on 3 bills he pocket vetoed. So that was the conclusion of our session. To recap how the session went, 469 legislative bills introduced. 107 of those were priority bills, of course. I put through in the written report, just kind of the success rate of these priority bills. And it's interesting to see how that breaks down. Of the speaker priority designations, all those were passed. I think 25 of the 33 of the committee priorities were passed, and only, like 23 of the 49 individual priority designation bills were passed. So those always tend to be more ideological bills, the pet bills, if I may say, of those senators. So those bills tend to have a lower success rate. From our perspective, between the 2017 and 2018 session, this board took a legislative position on 35 bills. It was about 50-50 positive to negative outcome. 17 was positive outcome, 18 was a negative outcome. I would say that interesting thought here or anecdote, of those bills that this board opposed, none of those bills ended up passing, with the exception of the budget. I think there was a resolution in opposition to the deficit budget and one of the budget bills that said it. But without that exception, there were no bills that passed. And I think that's a reflection of the current composition of our legislature. It's very difficult to get major items through. The filibuster continues to be more utilized all across the board from political spectrum. It's not one or the other. They're all consistently using it to their advantage, and more so every single legislative session. One bill that really consumed our time and energy this session was LB 776. That was by Senator McAllister, which put a limit on how much county jails can put on inmate calls. Happy to report that we worked very well with Senator McAllister, and the final passed version I think shouldn't have much of an impact, at least how I read it, because as county jails go across Nebraska, Douglas County is the lowest. There's some amended language in that bill that give a guidance for that rate, which I think Douglas County will be far below, and hopefully won't have an impact on us. I also included interim studies. Over 100 interim studies were introduced, many of interest, of course, to Douglas County. Joe Lorenz will have to give his annual defined benefits symposium to the retirement committee in the fall, which is mandated for all political subdivisions under 85%. One resolution that caught my eye was a potential vote by mail, which was a bill that we brought in 2017 by Senator Hansen. So those are two highlights. As you know, the elections are coming up. We've got a primary on May 15th. There are 6 term-limited senators and 2 that are not running for re-election. So there will be 8 new faces in 2019 in the Nebraska legislature. 2 chairmen, Senator Smith and Senator Larson, are both term-limited. And then there's a lot of contested legislative races. So only 5 of those that are running for re-election are unopposed. The other 11 face opposition. So I expect more than 8 to be turned over. Probably, not a lot more than that, but certainly a handful more is probably likely. So I want to thank this board for giving us the opportunity to represent you before the Nebraska legislature, and thank the staff and directors for all of their support throughout the session. We always need odd information in a moment's notice, and they're very helpful in getting that information to us. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, are there any, Marianne Boyerson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just want to thank you, Sean, and Julia, who's sitting down there. You guys did a great job for us again this year, and the accessibility of you at the last minute of things or during the discussion, you're always there and on spot and on target, and appreciate the hard work that you all did for us and the taxpayers this year, so thank you.
Well, thank you.
Commissioner Boyle?
Yes, I want to ask about a couple of things. One that I'm pretty concerned about, there's a meeting coming up about 911 and the division of fees and stuff. My wife was on the PSC, and she fought with no relief to get a better return. I was much surprised to find out that if we had increased our our charges from 50 cents to $1, that it just meant that more money would have gone to someplace else in Nebraska, that the formula is set up so that it's, I guess the nice word is rigged, so that it benefits others. I understand everybody has an ability to, we work together as a state, and we share revenue and all the rest of it, but this was pretty extreme. So I've been concerned that we should not support an increase to $1 because it doesn't help us. And of course, Senator Chambers is adamant about it, so I guess it's kind of a waste of time. And so there's a meeting coming up, I think it's the 13th of June, I believe, to discuss working on the formula, which I hope you'll be involved in. I believe it's at, I'm not sure, but I believe it's in Lincoln. In any event, I plan to attend to see what's going on. Is it June 13th?
It's at the PSC office.
Right, okay. And I think it'd be worthwhile because this may be a chance to solve some of the problem of trying to figure out what we really ought to be getting. LB 480 was a bill, I believe, that dealt with severing medical care when a person is incarcerated. And I haven't read it, I apologize for that, but did this apply to Medicare? Or was it, we don't have anything over that,
No,
it's federal law?
It does not. So LB 480 was actually a bill that was brought forward at the Douglas County Board's request that Senator McAllister carried. And,
Right.
and what that bill does is, if you have private health insurance,
Right.
and you are a pretrial detainee,
Right.
then the county can bill that private insurer for any medical costs that occur while in custody at the county jail. So I guess the problem it was trying to fix is private health insurance companies terminating your private health insurance just because the roof over your head is a county jail.
Right.
And that prevents them from doing that.
Okay, that didn't pass, did it?
It did.
Oh, it did,
It did.
okay, good deal. I want to ask Commissioner Borgeson if I could.
Sure.
What's the status of Medicaid coverage? Is Lancaster County, when somebody goes in there, they're still covered, but in Douglas, we're not?
No, anyone who goes into a jail, their Medicaid, years ago, it used to be the state of Nebraska terminated the Medicaid, but now we suspend it. So what that means is you go in, you still don't get to use it, but it's suspended until you go out. And when you go out, what our discharge planners do is they start working when they know their discharge date to get you back on as quick as possible, so you don't have to go through the whole process again. But no, any incarcerated person in any county jail does not get Medicaid reimbursement for their services.
What about Medicare? Does that go away too? Is that suspended, or do you know?
Most, I would say, in our jails, it goes away, but it's not. There's a smaller number of those that would qualify for Medicare.
Well, the reason I ask about that, of course, is that this is we're in the throes of renegotiating a contract with a provider, and I believe that the price. Correct me if I'm wrong. Which you will with glee. No, but anyway, I believe that we're paying about $5 million a year for servicing individuals in our correction facility.
Right.
So anytime we can get others to step up who have an obligation, particularly if they're just canceling it, and then of course I understand they have to. It's very difficult for people to come back and get re-enrolled. I mean, it's just another nightmare they put on people that are picked up. So this, to me, should be a big deal, and we ought to be talking to our federal representatives about it.
Well, the interesting thing is the argument is that they don't want to, quote, expand the cost of Medicaid, but these are individuals that already have it.
I know.
So the use of it would be only if they need medical services
Right.
while in the jail. Right. So it's not like you're signing on more people. They already have it.
Right.
And so, and again, they're all pre-adjudicated. So at the national level, we do have an initiative to have Medicaid be able to pay for those up to their sentencing time.
Okay. The last question I had was on Turk, LB 322. Can you recall the status of what happened on that bill, if you could?
Yeah, so LB 322, that was a bill by Senator Craighead. Of course, she resigned. And so that bill was not taken up by another senator. So Senator McAllister put forward LB 1006, I believe, which was similar. Well, it was taking a piece really on the rehearing portion. We had support to get that bill out of the Revenue Committee. Unfortunately, we were not able to get it out prior to the consent calendar deadline. The Revenue Committee wasn't meeting much in executive sessions for a period there. There was quite a bit of turmoil over what tax reduction package would come out, so they were avoiding it altogether, and unfortunately, we weren't able to get that out. But I think that bill, 1006, certainly has a support to pass.
Okay, good. The last thing I want to mention is the question we've all been talking about, but no one has brought up. Are you going to have St. Patrick's Day parties?
Yes, they'll continue to be ongoing, you bet.
Oh
We don't
my
know where
goodness.
the venue is.
Wow,
but,
that's been really a big
yeah,
item
so
here. And I
fear
do
not.
want to also comment on the confidence that I have in you, and I think the other members feel this way too. You have really stepped up, and bringing on Ms. Plucker is a great idea and a wonderful team. And I always knew you were behind the curtain, so you're doing a terrific job, Sean. I'm really proud. I've known you since you were very young, and you've really come a long way, and you're doing a terrific job. And it's a wonderful team that we have working for us. You're knowledgeable and pleasant, and you're available. That's a big deal. Thanks.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Claire?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would concur that we are well represented in Lincoln. My question is, in light of what you were just saying about how much turnover there's going to be in the legislature in the next year, I mean, take Senator Smith, for example, who is being term limited out. So who do we invite to our get-together in August? Do we invite Senator Smith, even though he's only got a couple months left, or do we invite both of the opponents that are going to be on the ballot in November?
My idea was to invite the candidates to sit in and listen with us, but I'm going to yield for sure to Julia and to Sean. But I would think we'd invite for certain that existing state senators termed out, just as a courtesy. And I think we should also invite the two candidates. It would be my idea. And I also would say that I think it'd be wise for us in an open meeting to at least meet with Sean and Julia, if they can, ahead of that breakfast, and not just a day ahead, but a week or 10 days, and get good direction from Sean. And I would say that the way you recall the number, know the bills, and you don't have notes, and you're not shuffling papers around to figure it out, you are totally in touch. And as Mike said, you know, the job you two are doing is so commendable, and we couldn't find any two people to do a better job. And I don't care if we spent twice as much. You are really on it, and it's really pleasant to see. And as a former legislator, I can tell you I have seen a lot of lobbyists, and you two are exceptional and really do it well.
Thank you.
Claire, does that, so we'll see what Sean, how he corrects what I say, and don't be afraid to offend me, Sean.
I think my instinct is invite everyone. I don't think it can't hurt. And as you know, the political world's a small one, and for one, maybe one of those challengers that doesn't win, they'll probably be involved in some capacity to make a decision, and more information out there, what we're doing, I think is better.
What do you think about that date of doing it earlier? I know you thought on the phone that sounded better.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, and from what, you know, the discussion earlier with corrections, I feel like that, you know, if there's any area where we can help legislatively, the sooner you start, the better. I mean, it's...
So why don't you think about some dates, and then you and I, and I'll let Chris Rogers know, and we can kind of talk about that and see how the commissioners are with those dates. And if it's September, August, we'll figure it out, or late August, we'll kind of look at things and see what works. So start to think about it, and we'll talk in the next few weeks.
Okay.
Commissioner Boyle. Well, there's something that, when I mention this, what I have in mind, I don't know if anyone will support, or, but I hope we do. I would like to see the city of Omaha involved as well. I mean, I think, for example, we ought to be making this a pleasant event, where we have a tour of the zoo, we have other things that go on, and invite the senator and the candidates to bring their significant other and so forth, and have them come to town, and then while enjoying things, they can also go see the Douglas County Health Center, they can see the corrections, they can see what goes on, what the pressures are, but then also have a real nice side. And I think there's some people in community who would pay for that, so it would not have to be out of county funds. I'd like to do that. I think it would, but involve the city to some extent. I know that maybe that's not, I think we have some issues of great concern that involve the city. We can't really ignore the elephant in the room, I guess. I think it'd be to our benefit, my thought.
Commissioner Kavanaugh, you were on next.
Sean, on that Turk bill, 1006, that just procedurally did not make it, and a lot of bills suffered that fate this year. Most bills suffered that fate this year. Would it be worthwhile for us to look at reintroduction of 1006? It is an improvement over the current Turk administrative practices, so.
I think it would be worthwhile. It was received well with the Revenue Committee. The hearing went great. Proponents, I think, were just myself, maybe NACO. And a Turk commissioner was in the hearing room. He did not testify against it. I did have an opportunity to speak with him, and they just had one concern to make sure that the timeline would work for, the Turk calendar so tight. And I think we were amenable to that change.
And I'm pretty sure Senator McAllister would be favorable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Carry it again. I want to commend you on your hard work on LB 776 regarding the jail's phone call revenue service. I mean, what you did really staved off a big problem for Douglas County that we would have had. If the bill in its original form had gone forward, I think it would have inflicted a severe revenue loss on us. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I think it was the tune of $600,000 a year. Now, you'd still get some revenue. I think the language in the introduced version was no more than a reasonable operating cost. What that means, I don't think anybody knows, but nonetheless, yeah, it would have been somewhat less than 600, but near that.
Finally, I noticed in your report that LB 1112 by Senator Vargas was amended into LB 670 by Senator Christ, which has to do with juvenile justice, and the pertinent portion would allow a one-time expenditure to convert an existing juvenile detention center or other existing structure for use as an alternative to detention. Now, those bills, do they contain federal or state funding? Is there state subsidies in those bills?
No funding in that bill, LB 670. However, I believe that the pertinent portion would apply to those community-based juvenile services fund, which is on an annual basis about $7 million a year. I noticed from the committee statement, well, I was at the hearing, but Cedars would have been the one provider that I noticed did testify in support of that. I don't know what their intention or plans would be for those funds, but certainly something to accommodate, their space for juvenile services.
And those provisions passed and were signed by the governor under LB 670 under
That's
the
correct.
Chris bill?
Yep.
Okay. Again, good work to you and Julia and Mike Kelly wherever he is.
Yeah,
So, thank you.
thanks.
Okay, we'll get together with you before and take some of what's been said and kind of give us some direction that you think is helpful. And then we'll listen to all the commissioners and we'll get set up.
Great.
And again, thank you for the way you do your job, your demeanors, and just how you handle it. It's
Great.
really great. We appreciate it a lot.
Thank you guys very much. Thank you.
Okay, now next week, we will not have a meeting on the 15th. And we do have need for executive session. Before we do, I want to say two things. First of all, I want to thank you all for allowing me to be vice chairman. The chances of my wanting to be chairman are about the same as us getting about 4 inches of snow this afternoon. But I do enjoy being vice chairman and occasionally having this privilege, and I really thank all of you for that privilege very much. The reason for executive session, go ahead.
You needed to state the reason. I thought you were
Litigation in real estate. So if we could have a motion and vote, please. Motion was by Mark Kraft and seconded by
Commissioner
Michael
Kavanaugh.
Webb.
Or, well, no, Commissioner, I need Commissioner Kavanaugh to vote. All right. Motion passes, all present voting yes.
to sell and move.
Oh, I hope
My
so.
sister did that.
It's too much work. He's helping me a great deal. So he really is.
I told her you're. Come on to our party.
Sweet. All right, motion passes. Commissioner Boyle is absent. All other commissioners voting yes.